You are sitting in the historic 1887 Eldridge Street Synagogue, and this was the first grand synagogue built by Eastern European Jews in the US. And this stunning building was nearly lost in the mid-20th century before a massive restoration project restored the space to its former glory and for public use. About a year ago, we received a grant from Lillian Dowman's Religion and Cultural Institutions Initiative to develop new exhibitions and programs that encourage dialogue with local and global audiences, opening doors to understanding the importance of religious diversity and its shared values. This multi-year project is grounded in the ideas of sacred space, sacred time, and sacred community. And we are looking forward to our program this evening, exploring sacred foodways of both Central and Eastern European Jewish and Ethiopian Jewry. We are thrilled to be the venue for this celebration and to be hosting our panelists this evening, culinary visionaries Beejhy Barhany, Leah Koenig, and Jeffrey Yoskowitz, and our program's producer and moderator, ROZANNE GOLD. Thank you so much to ROZANNE for curating and hosting this incredible series of author interviews here at the museum. It is because of ROZANNE's efforts and passion for bringing this meaningful content to all of you that we've been able to do this, and we are so grateful to her for that. Before I turn the program over to ROZANNE, who will introduce our panelists and kick off the program, I want to share a little bit about our program's producer and moderator. ROZANNE GOLD is an award-winning chef, author, journalist, and philanthropist known for her storied career. At 24, she was the first chef to New York Mayor Ed Koch and consulting chef to the legendary Rainbow Room and Windows on the World. A four-time recipient of the James Beard Award and author of 13 cookbooks, she has written for multiple prestigious publications and was one of 4 women chefs for peace on a mission to Israel. ROZANNE is considered Israeli food's original influencer by Tablet Magazine and one of the most important innovators in the modern food world by Julia Child's biographer Bob Spitz. An impassioned end-of-life doula and poet, her first book of poems, Mother's Sauce, was published by Dancing Girl Press. Please silence your devices and join me in welcoming our speakers this evening, and thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you. So excited to be here with you to celebrate life, light, and the many joys of Hanukkah. We are also here to celebrate Beejhy's beautiful new cookbook, Gursha. Let me just hold this up for you.
You want me to hold it?
Yes. Which was just named, beautiful, which was just named one of the best cookbooks of the year by the New York Times. Mazel tov, Beejhy. Leah and Jeffrey also have their own nakas to share, and we will get to hear what's new and exciting in their lives as well. The Eldridge Street Museum is among the most intriguing and beautiful in New York, if not the world. And yes, it was just named one of the 100 most beautiful buildings in the world in the summer by New York Magazine. So thrilled to be here to moderate this evening of food, history, and community. As leading authorities on Jewish food, with the help of Leah, Jeffrey, and Beejhy, we will expand the more familiar Eastern European roots of Ashkenazi Jews and delve into the cuisine of Italian Jews, Libyan Jews, and Ethiopian Jews. What these cuisines and cultures have in common is what is sacred to each, namely the recipes and rituals that have sustained them for so many generations. Tonight, we will learn how Jews around the world set their Hanukkah tables in ways that uniquely define their particular history. From the first pressing of the olive in biblical times, this holiday pays great tribute to its miraculous and mythical properties in an event that symbolically gets ritualized year after year. This year, we'll be lighting the first candle of Hanukkah on Sunday, December 14th at 4:28, so set your clocks. Recently, the museum at Eldridge Street has created a new series that you just heard based on the concept of sacred food. How and why is food such an integral part of the Jewish experience, of Jewish history? Food reminds us who we are and where we come from. Executive Director Bonnie Diamond says, I love this quote, "This building stands as a testament to Jewish cultural traits everywhere. the need to remember, the impulse to celebrate, and the obligation to instruct. Tonight we get to do all three. So before we meet our panelists, let's take a minute to get to know our audience. How many of you know what to do with a dreidel? Great. How many of you spell Hanukkah with an H? How many spell it with a C? Okay, half and half. If you light all the candles for all the 8 nights, how many candles will you use? 44. Who said 44 first? Bravo, okay. 44. How many branches does a Chanukah have? 9. Smart part of the room here. How long do the candles need to burn to fulfill the mandate? 18 minutes? Is that true? I have 30 minutes here, but I believe you. Thank you. How do you light the menorah? From left to right or right to left? You start right to left. Pretend it's in front of you. You start right to left, but when you light them, you put them in left to right. Okay. Now here's a really tough one to see how smart our audience is. How many teaspoons in a tablespoon? 3. Bravo. Okay, now we can get started. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we're going to start with Leah. Okay, so, but that's a wonderful question too. So it's 18 minutes that the matzah has to bake to fulfill the mandate, and I think it may be 30 minutes for the candle. Okay, but now we're so much smarter. Now we can start. Leah Koenig is a food writer with the soul and culinary instincts of someone who has been cooking for generations. That's not my quote, that's from Adina Sussman, who's a great food writer. Leah has written 7 cookbooks and has become an important voice in the Jewish culinary world. Her books include the acclaimed The Jewish Cookbook, Modern Jewish Cooking, The Little Book of Jewish Feasts, and the Hadassah Everyday Cookbook, among others. Her newest book, the award-winning Portico, Cooking and Feasting in Rome's Jewish Kitchen, was published by Norton in 2023 and won many awards. You will find Leah's articles in the New York Times, New York Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Food and Wine, Tablet, Epicurious, and Food 52, to name a few. She also writes a fabulous weekly newsletter called The Jewish Table that everyone can get on Substack, and I really recommend it. Fabulous recipes and wonderful essays, and you share a lot of your thinking about many things. Leah spends most of her time cooking and writing in Brooklyn, where she lives with her husband, Yoshi, who's a really fabulous musician and composer, and her 2 young children. And she teaches cooking classes and lectures all over the world. Welcome, Leah. Jeffrey. Jeffrey is a Latke scholar. I just made that up. He's a food entrepreneur, a writer, and a revivalist of Jewish heritage cuisine. He co-authored the critically acclaimed cookbook, The Gefilte Manifesto, New Recipes for Old World Jewish Foods, which was named a National Jewish Book Award finalist for contemporary Jewish practice. A chef, pickler, journalist, and recognized thought leader, Jeffrey co-founded the Gefilteria, a culinary venture that reimagines Ashkenazi Jewish cooking. He teaches, cooks, and lectures on food history and has taught at Brandeis University and City College, and his writings on food and culture have appeared in the New York Times and The Atlantic, among many others. I just learned this, but Jeffrey was just featured on Padma Lakshmi's show, Hulu's Taste the Nation, and you did a whole segment on Hanukkah. So people could actually go and look up Jeffrey and Hanukkah and find this segment. I can't wait. He was just recently tapped to represent Yiddish culture by the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. I like to think of Jeffrey as a gastro-nomad wandering the world looking for good things to eat. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And BJ. So Jeffrey and Leah, I know, and BJ, I'm just meeting tonight. Very, very excited to have you here. I just need to find her beautiful bio. Here. BJ is a chef, author, and restaurateur who has become a cultural and community icon. Born in Ethiopia, raised in Israel, and currently living in Sugar Hill, BJ is the founder of the BINA Cultural Foundation, which is the Beta-Israel North American Cultural Foundation, and the owner of Harlem's beloved Tsion Café. Is that how it's pronounced, BJ? Tsion Café, a renowned Ethiopian-Israeli restaurant that also happens to be kosher. She's the author of Gursha, subtitled Timeless Recipes for Modern Kitchens, a cookbook celebrating the sacred recipes and rich history of Ethiopian Jewry. BJ is a sought-after speaker and cooking teacher and is regularly featured media outlets across Israel and the United States, including the Today Show, the New York Times, Haaretz, Jewish Week, and many more. In addition, she is a wife, mother of two, and an important spokesperson for the Jewish Ethiopian community. As I said, although we've never met, I read every word of your gorgeous book, every word, and so I'm especially delighted you could join us tonight. Welcome, BJ.
Thank you.
I definitely need a sip of water, forgive me. So I'd like to invite everyone in the audience, and there's some people sitting back there. If you want to come closer, that would be beautiful. Feel free. I'd like to invite everyone to close their eyes for a minute. And I'd like you to think about a moment in your childhood history, your childhood home, and to think about a moment during Hanukkah. Who is there? What are you seeing, smelling, tasting? What is the feeling? Just keep your eyes closed for a minute and see if you can really tap into what Hanukkah was like for you, or if you don't celebrate Hanukkah, any other holiday that feels sacred. If you can remember the food, the smells, and who was there. Okay, you can open your eyes. Would anyone in the audience like to share just a moment? Who was there? What are you seeing, tasting, smelling?
My mom had a wooden bowl that she would make the latke in, the concoction. And I just had this memory of that bowl and the smell of latkes and yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, that was just to set the tone and the feeling, and again, the holiday starts on Sunday. But now I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share what they just tapped into. Leah?
I love that question. For me, I remember, so I grew up in a household, my mom was Jewish, my dad wasn't. My nuclear family, we were only Jewish, so we didn't celebrate Christmas in my home, just Hanukkah, but we did go to my sister's for Christmas. So I have like a whole set of memories of that. But in my house, what I remember is my mom's potato latkes, which are to this day the best I've ever eaten. I grew up in the 80s and 90s when processed food was still very much in vogue, but she was always went to the farmer's market, got her potatoes, grated them in a Cuisinart, not by hand, but that didn't make a difference. And they had these custardy centers and crackly edges. They were the shredded kind, not the mashed potato kind. And what really was the piece de resistance was her applesauce, because she would get the reddest apples she could find, usually like a Macintosh or a John Mac, I think that's what she got, and they were really red. She wouldn't peel them. And so when you mashed them up in a food processor, it was just bright ruby red. So I remember this ruby, seriously jewel-toned colored applesauce on top of these crispy latkes. And it is a thing I have been chasing since then and that I try to recreate for my family, but she still does it better.
You
Yeah.
see why she is such a good food writer? The descriptions of this simple dish, so gorgeous. Thank you. Jeffrey, your memory.
Well, I also have an applesauce memory. Hanukkah, it's a complicated gastronomic holiday. Looking back, I'm always thinking, like, what did I actually eat on Hanukkah besides gelt, latkes, and some donuts? Like, I don't remember feeling good on Hanukkah. But what I do, so my grandmother used to make really great applesauce, and she always would visit with jars of applesauce, but she didn't come. She came for Passover, she came for the Jewish New Year, for Rosh Hashanah, but not for Hanukkah, because Hanukkah's a minor holiday. She's not going to make the trek from Boston. And so that was when I would make, with my mother, we'd make the applesauce. And I had, we had an old food mill, we called it a Foley grinder, is that we kind of had, so one of these things where if you're really lazy, it's great because you just have to cut up the apples, throw them in with their skin on, and you can just kind of grind them, and then you get all that blush red. And so I had, with my mother, we'd make this applesauce. And latkes, at least when I was younger, were just a vehicle for applesauce. It really didn't matter. My mother, as things became in vogue, sweet potato latkes, we added that. And I remember when the zucchini latke had a moment growing up. Didn't quite make it, but we had it. But it was all just about the applesauce. We weren't a sour cream and applesauce family, just pure applesauce. And so to this day, whenever I need comfort, I just make applesauce and I bring out the old food mill. And I'll just say I also have a memory of eating crappy jelly donuts. Somehow I grew up in New Jersey, I went to a Jewish day school, and we just always had really bad jelly donuts. And only when I was older, did I know how good a jelly donut can be if you use really good ingredients and use great jelly. Great jam, and so that was what was coming to mind for me.
Thank you. Do you have an applesauce story too?
No.
Beejhy, tell us about your
But on
memory.
the contrary, I grew up in Israel. So immigrating to Israel, my first Hanukkah in Israel was magnificent. So, in Ethiopia, we didn't really celebrate, light up the Chanukah, the menorah, what have you, but we did know the story of the Maccabees and all of that. But growing up in Israel, arriving there a couple of months earlier, being introduced to the donuts, sufganiyah, it was delicious in comparison to your New Jersey one. So that, I grew up in that environment that throughout the month of December, we will all anticipate going to the Makole, to the deli, and buy sufganiyah with a powdered sugar. It was a delight. That's my recollection of Hanukkah in Israel. It was, as Jeffrey said, it is a minor holiday, not much of a meaning, religious, what have you. Then coming to the U.S., Hanukkah is such a big deal within American Jewry. It was a surprise for me. And then, getting into the habit of introducing it to my family and making a buying gift every night possible. But, in a way for me, it's kind of a contradiction. The whole story of the Maccabees was to create, not, to prevent from assimilation. What is it? I forgot the name. They didn't want the Jews to practice the way the Roman or the Greek, right, to worship the gods.
Syrian.
Assimilation, thank you. So they try to prevent that. That's the whole story of Hanukkah. Here we go here in America, going back at it, competing with Christmas. So that was kind of shocking for me when I came here to the U.S., but my delicious recollection of growing in Israel was sufganiyot donuts. You have to go back to Israel and try those donuts.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so we want to hear a little bit more about your history, your story, and then we're going to get more into Hanukkah and latkes and I guess applesauce and ingredients. But Leah, tell us a little bit about how Jewish cooking came to really inform your story, your life story, not just about Eastern European Jews, but now you are so interested in Italian Jewry.
Sure. Was anybody here for the talk that Roseanne and I did about Portico? Okay, so apologies, you may hear a story for a second time, but it's only 3 of you. Some of you probably forgot it. I probably forgot it. It's fine. So when I was first married, my husband and I went to Rome for our honeymoon. And I had grown up in the suburbs of Chicago, very Ashkenazi, eating all the brisket and the matzo balls and the whatever, the pastrami. Loved all those things. Ended up at a Shabbat dinner in Rome, where, first of all, I was a vegetarian at the time for 10 years at that point, and everything on the table that our host served us was a meat dish. Really delicious looking meat dish, but I was faced with the conundrum of what do I do? And I decided that the phrase "when in Rome" really was going to mean what it means that night, and I ate everything, and it was wonderful. But what really stuck out for me that night, I was also sort of a new food writer. I hadn't really decided whether I wanted to commit to writing about Jewish food primarily or whether I wanted to be more of a generalist. But at that meal, every single thing that our host Giovanni served was a traditional Roman Jewish food, and it was completely unfamiliar to me. Like, for them, it was what you have on Friday night, what you have for Shabbat. For me, it was brand new dishes. But because of the context, because it was Shabbat, because we had said the blessings over the wine and were drinking a lot of wine and hanging out and talking, it immediately felt familiar. It immediately felt at home. It immediately felt like something I intuitively knew, even though I hadn't eaten those particular foods. And so to answer your question, that was a moment for me where I said, wow, Jewish food. I mean, I knew there was Sephardi food and Middle Eastern and all these things, but I said, wow, Jewish food is so deep and so broad and so diverse that I want to spend my career studying it, sharing the stories, sharing the history behind it. And so that was kind of, that was 15 years before Portico was published, but in a way, that was the moment where I kind of solidified my personal journey as a Jewish food writer. And yeah, I need to go back to Rome.
Tonight, talk a little bit about how they actually celebrate Hanukkah in Rome, and maybe you'll tell us also a little bit about the Libyan cuisine and celebration of Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Because a whole influx of Libyans went to Rome in 1967. I think there's a community of around 2,000.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from reading your book, word for word, too. Jeffrey, you grew up in a traditional Ashkenazi Jewish home, went to Brown University, I didn't know that, to study history, especially Jewish history, and then went to New York Tech to get a degree in hospitality management.
No, that is actually the other Jeffrey Yoskowitz.
Is that, you did
Yes.
not go to Brown? And
No,
this is
I
not
went to
you?
Brown, but not to New York Tech. Interesting. It's funny, there's another Jeffrey Yoskowitz, we're cousins, and he's a pastry chef. For 30 years, taught at the Institute for Culinary Education, and often our bios get melded together. I seem like the most impressive person ever, because I would have opened a bakery when I was 10, and taught for 30 years at ICE, and now consult with all sorts of food startups. But it's very confusing. But that's
Okay, so can I just say, you just experienced this here for the first time. Do not trust AI, all right? You just, oh my God, that's actually a little embarrassing, because I didn't ask you for your bio. I went to wherever you go, but that's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your upbringing and a little bit about the Filteria, how you started that.
Yes, gladly. So I grew up in New Jersey, as discussed, in the suburbs of New Jersey, and all my grandparents were from Poland. So there were 3 survived the war, 1 left us beforehand. My mother's parents, they talked about life. Before the war, during the 6 years after in the DP camps. My mother was born in a displaced persons camp, and actually my uncle any minute will be walking in the door who is from that same family. So I grew up hearing about a world of Ashkenazi culture and food that was alive. My grandmother, she had a horrible experience during the war, but she loved her life before the war. She talked about the plum trees in her yard, the apple trees. Her favorite food, by the way, from her shtetl in Poland, from Shumsk, was bread and butter. They had a cow. They had fresh butter. They had great bread. I grew up in the 80s and 90s with margarine and store-bought bread, and so it's always like, what went wrong, And my grandmother cooked everything from scratch with love. She made the applesauce I discussed. She made my favorite dish, which was apple strudel. When I was 8 or 9, I literally followed her around and wrote down this recipe, which I still have and used to inform the apple strudel in the book. And I have the original recipe that I wrote out because I was scared. One day I realized I might not get this recipe if I don't write it down. And so I went to college, and the beautiful thing about going to a place like Brown is that you can do whatever you want there. So I actually made my own class on tea, coffee, and alcohol. I ended up, every class I made about food, and I did my senior thesis on the industrialization of kosher food in post-war America, and really the rise of, the boxes of matzah, of latke mix, and big matzah, matzah meal getting into all of our recipes instead of breadcrumbs, which is what should be in the recipes. There was an excess of matzah meal, so they had to get rid of it somehow. And they trained us all to use an inferior product in all of our dishes. We should not use matzah meal. But I can rant about all these things. But so I graduated from college, and like any good graduate from Brown University, I moved onto an organic farm, lived in a tent, and trained as a farmer and pickler. I left for a year, I came back, and then I apprenticed as a pickler. So I was making my mother really happy about that investment in this education. The pickling practice at this farm was a lacto-fermentation. So anyone who knows a good sour garlic dill pickle, this is what we're talking about. I was there in the summer, I came back for the fall, I was there for sauerkraut season. Now, a few things I learned on this farm about myself. One is I was taught as an Ashkenazi Jew, I was destined to a life of terrible digestion, and that IBS was my future. And I actually couldn't digest dairy at that point. After 3 months on a farm eating naturally fermented foods every single day, I was suddenly able to eat foods I couldn't otherwise eat. I felt incredible. And I came back. I've been making fermented foods and eating them all the time ever since. So I came back, and and that really unlocked something for me being on this farm, because I discovered, would you know it, my tradition, the tradition that I was always taught was unhealthy and bad for you, these Jewish delis, mile-high sandwiches and all that. It's a seasonal tradition. Cucumber harvest is 1 month. If you want to eat cucumbers in the shtetl in the wintertime, you had to preserve them. And if you wanted to eat cabbage, and it's actually such a healthy seasonal tradition. And I realized that the stories of my grandmother, the experience on this farm, there was something about my heritage, my culinary heritage, that didn't make sense. And so I came to New York, I worked in the food world, I eventually met my business partner and co-author Liz Alpern, and we both were working in food and talking to each other and saying, we really love this food. Maybe we could make it cool again.
Beautiful. Actually,
Yeah.
we're going to hold it right
Great.
there and then get to gefilte and to talk about whether even gefilte fish even has a place at the Hanukkah table.
Yeah.
But Beejhy, so your life story is a true hero's journey, and a dangerous one at that, at times. From escaping Ethiopia as a little girl in the middle of the night, walking to Sudan, emigrating to Israel, and then moving to New York to open a restaurant of all things. So please tell us more about your journey. It's a very unusual, very poignant one.
We're going to spend the next 24 hours.
Each one of you has
Yes.
a 24-hour story.
Well, I call myself the Wandering Jew. I was born in Ethiopia, but my ancestors been dreaming, yearning for the return to the Promised Land for thousands of years. And that yearning eventually led to that particular night where we decided, over 300 people, to start exodus from Ethiopia to Sudan. And it's probably hard to fathom that you're leaving everything that you had and you're starting a treacherous journey in order to fulfill a prophecy. But what I can tell you is, my community, my parents, my grandparents had such a strong belief that we all need to be in the Promised Land, in Tsion. Life in Ethiopia was very much idyllic, beautiful way that I recall, smelling the aroma of delicious dabo in the air, baking on a Friday afternoon, and the preparation for Shabbat dinner starting from Thursday. Well, you don't want to be, bothered by labor or prepping anything on Friday, since you have to put your best dress and take a shower in order to welcome Shabbat, the Queen. That's the environment, that's the Hebraic tradition of my community that I was brought up in. And of course, in the middle of it, we had many relatives that emigrated to Israel in the 40s, 50s, and they keep kind of encouraging us. This is the time to make the journey. And it so happened in the early 1980s, a village of 300 people hired a guide, and we started the exodus of my community. Arriving in Israel, in Sudan, we literally had, in a way, kind of to hide our Jewishness. But the Sudanese were very pleasant, kind, and offer, whatever they had. And we lived there for 3 years. The reason behind it is a lot of bureaucracy and red tape that at that point, the recognition of black Jews, Ethiopian Jews, should they immigrate or not, and what have you. But nonetheless, the determination of my parents was a lot more stronger than anything else, even though with the rejection and not willing to welcome black Jews to Israel. We will cut it short. We made it to the promised land, the land of honey and milk, right? We make it there. It wasn't exactly that, because for us, I just give you an idea of what was the preparation for Shabbat, which means you don't do any labor, you cease from any labor, the preparation starts on Thursday, and you just relax on Shabbat. Here you go, you finally make it to Tsion, Eretz Israel, and everybody is driving their car, doing the laundry, and yet we are questioned of our Jewishness. It was kind of, and mind-blowing, very disappointing, but regardless, Israel is home. This is where we belong, and my parents integrated fully to Israeli society, and myself very enthusiastic to be so Israeli that I didn't want to associate myself with Ethiopian food. I was ashamed of it in somewhat, that I wanted to go live in a kibbutz, eat, with friends in a dining hall, work the land, and to be the salt of the land, yeah? And afterwards, you go serve in the army, like any Israeli, and after the service, what do? You wander the world, right? So I decided to come, the wanderer, the wandering Jew on my own term, coming to New York, loved what I saw, specifically going to 125th Street, Harlem, even though they told me not to go there, it's dangerous. Anyhow, I came, I saw, it was beautiful, very empowering to see a lot of businesses owned by black people, the whole history of Renaissance and what have you, and I wanted to be part of it. But yet, left the Americas, continued on my travel, encountered with many ethnic groups, even did the Machu Picchu, the Inca Trail in Peru, and all of that stuff. And I came back in the early 2000s because Harlem been calling me. And before that, as you mentioned, I formed BINA to empower and celebrate Ethiopian Jewish culture and heritage, because as a Jew on a Friday night, what do? You go to a synagogue. So I go on the Upper West Side to this particular synagogue, me and my friends, and we encounter a particular Karen that questioning what we are doing there. And that was disappointing. Because, the only way I guess you can go to that synagogue, you had to be the babysitter or something or the other. You couldn't be there to worship as a Jew. And that kind of, triggered me in a way, but yet it pushed me to the direction of, you know what, there is a lot of ignorance. We need to empower and celebrate. That's why BINA came. And we did a lot of Shabbat dinners to celebrate Jewish diversity and inclusion, going from Shabbat dinners, film screening, and all of that. And then the question of what is Jewish food came. And again, I said, let me solve the problem. And I decided to open Tsion Café. My heart and soul is always in Tsion, even though I'm in the West, and it's located in Sugar Hill, Harlem, to celebrate the different flavors, or not only Ethiopia. I have food from Yemen, Sudan, Nigeria. It's a celebration of the delicious Jewish diaspora.
Perfect. Wonderful. And that is, thank you, right? Such an amazing story. But you asked the question, which is why we're here tonight. What is Jewish food? And we're here to celebrate Hanukkah and talk about Hanukkah. So Leah, if you could tell us a little bit about the way the Italian or the Roman Jews celebrate Hanukkah specifically. There's also a wonderful story you tell about there was a time in Roman history where Jews really didn't have the ability to work at many jobs, and they were actually became friars as one of their professions. So tell us about Hanukkah in Rome.
Sure. Well, in a way, Roman Jews celebrate Hanukkah year-round, and that's because frying foods, deep frying foods, is one of the main ways that Roman Jews cook their vegetables and other things. And there's a reason for that. One, it's one of the centers of olive oil, right? I mean, it's just the oil that's around, although I do not recommend frying in olive oil if you have a choice, because it has a lower smoke point. You want to use an oil that's more neutral, or goose fat, as Jeffrey likes, but I like to do like a sunflower. But in Rome, they fry everything in oil, and part of that, well, you know, the more ancient story, actually, the first Jews who came to Rome were emissaries of the Maccabees, so they actually are sort of connected to the Hanukkah story in a way, in terms of, you know, the time that they came. But for about 320-ish years, from the 1500s until 1871, the Jews of Rome lived in the Roman Jewish ghetto, which was a prescribed neighborhood where they were allowed to leave during the day if they wore identification, but had to be there at night. And their lives were very, very restricted. It was sort of around the same time as the Inquisition in Spain, but instead of saying you have to convert or leave or be murdered, they said, we're going to try to make your life so difficult that you want to convert, you are compelled to convert to Catholicism. And one of the main ways that they were constrained is that they were not allowed to do almost any profession. And the three professions they were allowed is they could be in the schmata business, although there's a different word in Italian for schmata, like the rag selling business. They could be money lenders, and we know where that stereotype led. And they could be friggitori, which literally means people who sold fried food on the side of the street. So they were like the original food carts, or like food trucks. And so they fried everything. They fried vegetables, they fried fish, they fried cheese. God, fried mozzarella, so delicious. Sorry, I just remembered like pulling a ball of fried mozzarella when I was in Rome. It's a great memory. And most famously, they fry whole artichokes. Has anyone raised your hand if you've had a whole fried artichoke? Okay, you're very lucky. It's called carciofi alla Giudia, or Jewish-style fried artichokes. And you literally fry the entire blossom with some of the outer leaves taken off, not once but twice. First, to kind of soften the inside at a lower heat, and then a second time at a higher heat to crisp up the leaves, so they're basically like potato chips. So they're frying all year round. People say that fritto misto, which is sort of like Italian tempura, right? Like battered and fried vegetables. They say it originated in the Roman Jewish ghetto. Now everybody eats it. So it's really not a Hanukkah-specific thing to fry the way it is for a lot of other communities, but they do have specific things that they do fry on Hanukkah.
I think you mentioned fried chicken.
Yes, well, that's actually not Rome, that's Tuscany.
Oh, okay.
Italian Jewish communities have different food ways, but they fry supli, which are like the rice balls. Trying to remember what else that they do specifically for Hanukkah. Definitely the fritto misto, which they call pizzetti. And they would potentially do artichokes, but it's not quite artichoke season. And if you talk to a Roman Jew, they say you should only eat artichokes in like February to April when they're in season. But I think you can, if you're in Rome during Hanukkah, you can still find them and they're delicious. But yeah, it's really, I don't want to make it seem like they're frying all day, every day, but it is central, although it's not so bad. It is so central to their food ways and their cuisine that I think, you know, Hanukkah just feels like any other time.
And do they also make sufganiyot?
No, they don't make sufganiyot. Yeah.
So some of these traditions are really very specific to specific cultures.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, since you are the latke maven, You mentioned that in the book that latkes were traditionally cooked in goose fat, and that the holiday has never recovered. You felt that was very sad. And that you've also traced the origin of the latke to fried cheese fritters in Italy. And Leah, you would agree with that. Okay, another area of Italy. Jeffrey, tell us about the latkes you make at home. If not in goose fat, what makes them special? What fat do you use? What potatoes do you use? What is your method for shredding?
All good, all very good questions. So, yes, the latke has had a whole journey, an international journey. It's, a lot of foods in Eastern and Central Europe actually came by way of the Italian Jews, and they migrated. At one point, we had what was a cheese, more like a ricotta-style pancake, was more of a buckwheat-style pancake, and then was more of a turnip-style pancake. So I love to mix some root vegetables in with my potatoes, a classic russet potato. I mean, the potato was only introduced into Eastern and Central Europe in the 19th century, so this is a relatively modern concept, the potato pancake. So it's always very interesting talking about a lot of what we think of as traditional Eastern European Jewish foods, as a lot of the ideas for them, a lot of them are kind of stuck in what we knew in the mid-20th century. But there was a lot of dynamism. This was forever changing. So I like to reference that when I'm making latkes. So I throw in some turnips, I throw in some parsnips. Mostly, I have a potato base. One of the things I've been doing lately, which I'm really into, anyone who knows Barbara Kirstenblatt-Gimlet, who is this amazing scholar of Jewish folk culture and foodways. She was one of the a teacher at professor at NYU, and she's one of the head curators of the Polin Museum in Warsaw. And she is adamant every year. She always has posts online about anyone who's shredding their potatoes and not grating them, you're not doing it right. And like hand grating is really what she swears by. So the one thing is I grew up with a shredded latke, and that's sort of what I know. But what I've been doing is actually doing a mix, about a half grated or sometimes even a half pulsed in the food processor, half shredded, and it gives the texture of the shredded latke, but it holds together like one of those, a grated latke or like a pulsed potato latke, and I really enjoy that texture. So that's been my go-to. It's like about sometimes half-half. I'm a little bit loose with it.
Grated onion?
Definitely onion. I actually put scallion in too. I like the scallion in there. I throw some breadcrumbs in there. I do use some flour as binder. I know that's something people debate. I always, of course, do the potato starch, that collects at the bottom. Now, there's a lot of talk around squeezing out your potatoes, and I, at some point, even I think in the book, tell people to do the whole squeeze. I have now changed my method, and I do a squeeze right before the point of frying. So I have everything in. I'm trying to make everything less fussy, okay? And then right before I go into to fry, I have a separate bowl where I just squeeze out in my hand, and it has made my life so much better. Now, quickly to talk fat. So I also, goose fat I love. I try to eat mostly vegetarian for the most part. So I definitely love a high smoke point oil. I mean, if you want to spend money, a nice avocado oil, all that. But I tend to do like a peanut oil lately. That's kind of a nice high smoke point oil. But the reason I love the goose fat is because of the Hanukkah goose. So how many of you, anyone here grew up eating a goose for Hanukkah? Has anyone here heard of a goose for Hanukkah? I see a nod. You knew of it. Okay. So, talking about a seasonal tradition. So, right around in the fall, right around the high holidays, traditionally you would start fattening up your geese in the shtetls. Okay. What would you do? You would fatten them up so they'd have enough fat, so that because if you were going to eat throughout the winter, you needed to have animal fat. But the goose would collect, similar to ducks. They build up these fat repositories. But then throughout the winter, if you kept feeding them, they're just going to be eating your food and not getting any more fat because it's already cold. And then you'd use the feathers for your bedding. Some families would keep the liver stored in fat, keep it for Passover. You'd use foie gras, exactly. That's your special Passover foie gras. There's an amazing Shalom Aleichem Yiddish writer's story called Goose, or called Geese, about a salty woman who raises a flock of 30 geese to make some money off of it. And then you would, on the Sabbath of Hanukkah, you would roast a goose. And you would fry the latkes in the goose fat. Now, for me, I mentioned earlier, Hanukkah didn't make any sense culinarily because I always got a stomach ache. I was eating latkes and gelt and jelly donuts all the time. And now suddenly if you have a roast goose, and I cook it with apples and onions, and then you fry your latkes in that goose fat. This is a seasonal meal in keeping with that tradition. And even in New York City, on the Lower East Side, there's stories in Jane Ziegelman's book, 97 Orchard. She talks about folks who tried raising geese in the backyards of their tenements. Right? So this was such an important tradition that we lost mostly because of our industrialized food system. And chickens became the desired poultry. And in fact, chickens were much easier to raise in confined spaces. Geese need to be grass-fed, which is harder in America. So I really believed in bringing back the Hanukkah goose tradition.
I love that. I think Hungarians did a lot of that. So that's kind of how I know about it. That's my background. So please tell us about Hanukkah in Ethiopia when you were a young girl. I know you had a pet goat, right? And it did sound very idyllic reading this gorgeous story. But then you went to Sudan, and there were very special fried little donuts that you made in Sudan, and then how you celebrated in Israel.
Okay, so I just want to be clear on this. Hanukkah really had not significant or much of a celebration in Ethiopia, period.
Okay. No latkes,
no
sufganiyot.
no sufganiyot. But we did preserve Maccabees 1 and 2 and gave it as a gift to the world. So that's the contribution of Ethiopian Jews. But not frying latkes of Sufganiyah doesn't really indicate your Jewishness or Hanukkah celebration. What I can tell you though, when we immigrated to Sudan, there was street vendors that fried this particular delicious spiced donut called ligamat. And I kind of created a version of it. It's very straightforward. It should take about 30 minutes to make a nice batter with a little bit of coriander, cardamom, cinnamon, and that is the spice. It's like chai spice. And if you want, you can infuse it with a little bit of jelly. That's the aspect of Hanukkah. You know, I guess I have to go with the flow. But that's the, connection. And I created a whole menu in the book just to say, it's such a big deal, might as well go and do it. Creating to the point where I created a Berbera spice fish with injera taco, just to give it a delicious menu for the Hanukkah lovers. So I don't, get leftover or something of that nature. But overall, as you indicated, but life in Ethiopia, it was idyllic. And again, the yearning for the return and life in Israel. Living in Israel, we had the challenges, but that is home. And as I indicated earlier, there was a whole anticipation as a child going to school. Every morning in December, the rainy days, going to this deli and picking up a sufganiyah. That's the vivid memory I have of Hanukkah as a whole. I'm sorry, I'm not that exciting, but if you ask me about different sacred and special holidays such as Pesach or Rosh Hashanah or Sigd, I can be very vivid and tell you details about it.
Wonderful, and we'll have you back for all of those. Yes, good idea, right? So in December of 1999, I was featured in a cover story of Gourmet Magazine when Ruth Reichel was the editor. The story was called Roseanne Gold's 3-Ingredient Hanukkah. And for some of you who know or don't know, that I kind of got well known for my 3-ingredient recipes. So I created a unique and pretty special festive menu for this magazine. I have a copy of it. But in that spirit, I asked each of our guests to create a special Hanukkah menu that was maybe a little forward-thinking, a little, Jeffrey, I don't know if you decided to deep fry a piece of gefilte fish, I'm not sure. But Leah, why don't we start with you?
Lovely. Can I say 2 quick follow-up things? One is, they're not going to be as good as what you grew up with, but I live in South Brooklyn, and there are so many bakeries there that make very good sufganiyot. So if you need to recreate it, you can just go to South Brooklyn. like Avenue J. I'll give you the spots, and they do very creative flavors. And the other thing I wanted to quickly say is on the cheese latke, the Italian front. So Roman Jews make a cheesecake, but not like a New York cheesecake. It's more like a baked ricotta cheesecake thing that has become a favorite Christmas dessert in Rome. So I love that there's sort of this like Jewish to Christian like flowing thing that's happening.
In Hungary, in Budapest, the floden, which is it's this Christmas dessert. In the Jewish version, it's just three different. It's like a pastry, and it's there's three different fillings. There's a lekvar filling, a prune spread, walnut, and then an apple. And then the Jewish version is all three stacked. And it's just a funny,
Lots of crossover.
Yeah. And of course, in Poland and in Lithuania, they eat gefilte fish for the Feast of the Seven Fishes.
Oh, amazing.
Jewish-style carp, it's called.
Love it.
Was there a special menu?
Okay,
or
sorry.
something
Yes.
that you're working on?
I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget those things.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have two. One, for my newsletter this week, I made everyone's had tomato soup and grilled cheese. So I decided to make a tomato soup, and I have seen people take latkes and make a grilled cheese with them. To me, that's like too much. So what I did is I folded in a little bit of melty like mozzarella and then also some Parmesan into the latke batter. So as you fry, you get that crispy, cheesy outside, and then like you get a cheese pull if you open the latke, and like that in the tomato soup. It's pretty spectacular. So I highly recommend that. But for me on Hanukkah, I find latkes, right? Latkes are a side dish. They're not the main event. And you're always sort of like, what do I pair these essentially like individual crispy potato kugels with? And so for me, the answer is just a really good beef stew. I love like totally American, maybe like a little Hungarian, like paprika, whatever, beef stew, carrots. I don't put potatoes in because of the latkes, but the richness of the stew and the crispiness of the potato latkes is just such a winning combination. And then I serve it with just a really bright green salad. And here's the kicker, champagne. Because champagne feels festive, and the bubbles of the kind of sparkling wine cut through all that richness so wonderfully. So like little salad with a bright vinaigrette, latkes, beef stew, and champagne. You cannot have a better Hanukkah meal than that, I think.
Sounds amazing. And I love the idea of 8 nights of champagne, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I don't do it all 8 nights, but
That's terrific.
that's usually our first night, yeah.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Leah, thank you. Jeffrey.
So this is exciting, this question, because Friday the 19th, I'm taking part in a Hanukkah dinner that a friend of mine is hosting in Philadelphia. He's a chef. And a number of years ago, I wrote an op-ed calling for the return to the Hanukkah goose. We got to bring it back. I talk a big game. It's hard to get a goose. It's actually very difficult. You can pre-order one for Christmas. They're quite expensive. It's not exactly the most exciting thing to invite people over for a goose dinner. It's also, I live in Brooklyn in a small apartment. A friend of mine is a chef who was really excited by this idea that he invited 7 other chefs to come and all be part of the first annual Hanukkah Goose Extravaganza. And so we actually have a goose farm in Wisconsin as a sponsor, and a foie gras maker also sponsoring. And so I'm going to be working on a few things. I'll actually be making a few different types of latkes. And one with an applesauce that was a creation of mine and the chef Ari Miller, which we did a Hanukkah dinner together a few years ago, which is a mustard applesauce. And for those people who always say, applesauce, isn't that a strange condiment? When you add this mustard, we pickled mustard seeds and infused them in the applesauce, and then we made a mustard applesauce, and then you understand applesauce with all of its tartness and that complexity mixed with the heat of the spice of that mustard. It made for the same way you get a feeling of ketchup and mustard as a condiment. You're like, oh, applesauce really does work to cut the fat, and the acid of that condiment. So we're going to be making that. I'm making something. So when I talk about eating these fatty foods, similar to going to a deli, you have a pickle with your pastrami sandwich. It plays the role, one, of helping digest it, but two, of cleansing your palate. Right? So every time you eat a fatty pastrami sandwich at Katz's right nearby, your tongue is coated in fat, so you need that acid to cut it. So I, inspired by my uncle, who is now here from Madrid, one of my favorite foods, I've been going to Madrid for 2 years, is something I was mispronouncing as a gilda, but it's a hilda, which is a skewer that has an anchovy, a pickle, and some pickled pepper, sometimes an olive as well, all together. And it's this umami bomb that is so amazing. And every time I eat it, I say, this just feels so Ashkenazi. And so I'm making a version with herring, dill pickles, and pickled onions, and we're going to serve that along with this. And we're going to have some, liver pate. There's going to be goose. There's going to be sufganiyot that are actually, by the way, pączki, the Polish donut, and Berliners. And this is actually an Eastern European donut that came to Israel, so we know them as sufganiyot, but it actually has its origins in Central and Eastern Europe. And so we have, actually the New York-based pastry chef Caroline Schiff is going to be making these sufganiyot, but they're going to be fried in goose fat, and she's making very special jams and fillings to go inside. So, and a bunch of other, and one other, and because I love the creativity of bringing different chefs together, one of the chefs coming is Aaron Israel, a chef from Shalom, Japan in Brooklyn, and he's making his okonomi latka. So for anyone who knows, okonomiyaki is a Japanese pancake you serve with the Japanese mayonnaise and bonito flakes and another sauce. He's making that, but a latke version with pastrami that he cures and smokes in-house in Williamsburg. So it's going to be a lot of fun, but I'm bringing, it's like this dream coming to life that I've just been so excited about. And I'll just say, and there's a cocktail menu to kind of go with it, to play with a lot of these ideas. So it's just a lot of fun.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So who's coming for dinner?
And I think Beejhy would like to come. So you said there aren't a lot of foods that are traditional to Ethiopian or the Sudanese, and there's not a lot of deep frying in Ethiopian cuisine. And I do want to tell you that my husband's favorite spice, he makes it by like this much, is bear, which is such a part of your cuisine. And that he made your recipe this week. I'm sorry he's not here tonight, for dorowat.
Oh, wow.
And it was fantastic and even better the second day.
Always.
Always.
Yes,
Right.
so,
just tell us about your festive, inventive Hanukkah menu. Go
Yeah,
crazy.
festive, inventive. So I started earlier with the ligama, the Sudanese, and of course a delicious fish taco, but the way I will do the fish is with the berbere. Berbere is an Ethiopian spice blend, consists of about 18 spices, a lot of delicious aromatic that enhances the flavor of any dish. If you want to make Ethiopian food, make that blend and rub it on your fish, on your vegetables, make a nice simmer stew, and you got earthy, flavorful, a little bit spicy, but you can wash it down with a little bit of delicious honey wine, which is actually, there is a recipe for it, which is the ancient drinks of the god. 100% honey, you ferment it, and usually when you eat a spicy food, drinking honey wine, it kind of washes your palate and you have a nice start and beginning. So dorowat is a traditional Ethiopian stew, which is, it would take about 3 to 5 hours to simmer. It really depends how many people are in your table or they are invited, but it's a whole preparation, as you indicated earlier.
All day.
Yeah, the next day, even the 2 days later, it will taste better because the integration of the different spices with the onion, garlic, and ginger is kind of marinating. The longer it stays, the better it is. So give it a day or two, or even a week. I mean, eat it during the week, but you will see the changes of the flavor. My menu will be, as I say, dorowat with injera bread, which I will make it a bit crispy, maybe fry it briefly to give a little bit of crisp. And do you know, any of you had Ethiopian food before? How many?
Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow. So, as you know, the injera bread is the staple of Ethiopian cuisine. It's usually made from teff, which is naturally gluten-free. As you may know, we've been trendy for millennia, right? And doing a lot of veganism as well is within the culture, nothing foreign. And the best aspect of it is you eat it with your hands. That's the first utensils given by God to utilize this. And usually my belief is when you touch your food, it tastes even better. So indulge with your food. Don't be scared to touch it. At the end of the day, your hands are the cleanest part, or whenever you go to a restaurant, rather than getting the fork from the restaurant, you know where your hand's been, right?
Well,
Yes?
you're right, your right hand.
Your right hand. Yeah, but that would be my menu. And don't be discouraged by trying something new. Writing Gursha, I kind of learned to make it as accessible and simple and not intimidating as much. If your husband managed to make the berbera and make dorowat, is he a chef by training?
Not really, but he's good at following a recipe.
Nice. And it's very simple instruction, so any of you can make the dorowat, even the injera. So, chicken.
Chicken based.
It's a whole chicken, or you can do drumsticks. Within Ethiopian tradition, we actually cut the chicken in 12 pieces, like the 12 tribes, and each part is given to a particular person in the household. It's not just like that. You cannot take the drumstick. It belonged to the firstborn son or something like that. So there is a whole hierarchy and positioning, even eating the chicken.
Wait.
One note I'll just
Yes,
say.
please.
If anyone's intimidated by making their own injera, you have a recipe. I've had the pleasure of cooking from books extensively, and you have a recipe for a fast-tracked wheat flour-based injera that is really good and far less intimidating for anyone who wants to dip their toes in. And I'd recommend starting there if you're unsure, because it made it a lot of fun to host a dinner centered around the recipes from your book.
These are wonderful creative menus, and we have to remember that Hanukkah is all about the miracle of the 8 nights, and it's all about oil and olive oil. So we can't do a lot of what you spoke about, but we could all make latkes, sprinkle it with berbera, and eat it with our, how do you pronounce it? Berbera.
Berbera.
Not great, but sprinkle it with
Berbera
that.
is a tribe
Okay, oh, the berbera.
in Morocco.
Spice mixture, yes. And eat it with your hands. So you're halfway there. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming.